Hello everyone, my name is Winda and right now I'm going to present my explanations of the little analysis of poetry from Robert Frost's poems and short story from The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. Okay, so first of all, the poems that I want to analyze is from the Robert Frost. It's Out, stopping by woods on a snowy evening and the road not taken. Okay, so the first poems is Out. I'm going to read the poems first. The bus so snarled and rattled in the yard, and made dust and dropped stove-length sticks of wood, sweet-scented stuff when the breeze drew across it, and from there those that lifted eyes could count. Five mountain ranges, one behind the other, under the sunset far into firmament, and the sow snarled and rattled, as if run like or had to bear a lot, and nothing happened. Day was all but done. Call it a day, I wish they might have said, to please the boy by giving him the half hour that a boy counts so much when saved from work. His sister stood beside him in her apron to tell them supper. At the word, they saw, as if to prove souls knew what supper meant, leaped out at the boy's hand or seemed to leap. He must have given the hand, however it was, neither refused to meeting. But the hand! The boy's first outcry was a rueful laugh as he swung toward them holding up the hand, half in appeal but half as if to keep the life from spilling. Then the boy saw all, since he was old enough to know, big boy, doing a man's work, though a child at heart. He saw all spoiled. Don't let him cut my hand off. The doctor, when he comes. Don't let him, sister. So, but the hand was gone already. The doctor put him in the dark of ether. He lay and puffed his lips out with his breath, and then the weather at his pulse took fright. No one believed. They listened at his heart. Little, last, nothing, and that ended it. No more to build on there. And they, since they were not the one that turned to their affairs. Okay, so from the poems you can see the extrinsic elements by the social aspect, historical aspect, and biographical aspect. So the first one is social aspect. The poem reflects early 20th century rural American life, where children often work to help their families, and it showed the harsh reality of labor and the lack of safety or emotional care for young workers. By the historical aspect, it written in 1916 during a time when industrial tools like buzz saws became common in farms. Frost captures how progress and machinery could be dangerous, even fatal. So, by the biographical aspect, Frost lived in rural New England and often worked about the farm life. The boy's death may reflect Frost's awareness of how fragile life was, especially in isolated working communities. We can also saw the symbols and the meaning by this line. The buzzsaw, it symbolizes industrial power and human danger. It snarled and rattled like a wild animal, representing how work and technology can harm innocent lives. Also, the boy's hand, it represents innocence and youth was labor. The sunset symbolizes the end of life, it foreshadowing the boy's death. The title itself, Out, alludes to Macbeth's Out, brief candle, meaning that life ends quickly and unexpectedly. Okay, so for example, the line from the poem where it tells little, less, nothing, and that ended it. This line basically just emphasizes the suddenness of death and how quickly life fades. Okay, by the imagery, we can see the auditory, visual, and tactile. By the auditory, the line was the buzz snarled and rattled. It creates a harsh and dangerous tone. And by the visual, we can see the line five mountains range one behind the other. It paints a peaceful setting that contrasts with the violent accident. And the third one is tactile, where the line is the hand, the boy's first outcry was a rueful laugh. It lets the reader feel the pain and the shock. And through imagery, Frost contrasts the beauty of nature with the brutality of machinery, creating a tragic, ironic mood, and it shows how quickly peace can turn to death. So the second poems from Frost is Stopping by Woods on a snowy evening. I'm going to read the poems first. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flick. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. We can see the extrinsic elements from these poems. It has the social aspect, historical aspect, and biographical aspect also. So, by the social aspect, the poem reflects the peaceful yet demanding life of rural America. In the early 20th century, and it shows a moment of calm reflection during a busy life, and a man pausing in the snow, torn between rest and duty. And by the historical aspect, the poem written in 1922 and published in 1923, after World War One, and during that time, people were searching for peace and meaning in rapidly changing world. The poem mirrors the desire for rest in a chaotic area, and the last one is biographical aspect. So first read it while living in New Hampshire, surrounded by woods and snow. He often found inspiration in nature and solitude. Some interpret the poem as Frost's reflections on life, death, and responsibility. As he once said, he wrote it after staying up all night working. We can also see the symbols and the meaning by the words. It symbolizes peace, beauty, and possibly or escapes. And they represent the temptation to rest or give up on life burdens. The horse, it symbolizes rational thought and responsibility, it reminding the speaker of his duties. The journey symbolizes life itself, it filled with commitment and obligations. While the miles to go before I sleep, it can both literal distance to travel and metaphorical life to live before that or sleep. For example, the woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. And these lines show the contrast between the desire for rest and the duty to continue living. The imagery of these poems, we can see the visual, auditory, and tactile. By the visual, the line where it says, "Whose woods these are, I think I know." It sets a quiet and snowy scene. And the auditory, the line is, "The only other sounds, the sweep or of easy wind and downy flick." It builds a peaceful silence. And the last one is tactile. The coldness of snow and the stillness of the night let readers feel the scene. And through imagery, Frost makes the reader feel the deep solitude and pull between peace and duty, a universal human experience. Okay, the last poem is The Road Not Taken. I'm going to read the poem first. Two roads diverge in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel but, and be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wonder where, though as for that the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves, no step had trodden black. Oh, I keep the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on the way, I doubt if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Some were ages and ages hence. Two roads diverge in a way, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. We can see the extrinsic elements from these poems by social, historical, and biographical aspect also. So by the social aspect, the poem reflects individualism, an important value in the early 20th century American society. And it shows how people often face life choices alone with no guarantee of what's right or what's wrong. By the historical aspect, the poems written in 1915 during a period when Frost was living in England. The poem reflects the modernist era's focus on uncertainty and personal experience. It shows how every choice defines one's life path. By the biographical aspect, Frost wrote it after working with his friend Edward Thomas, who often regret not taking different paths during their walks. So the poem playfully yet thoughtfully explored decision making and human regret by showing Frost's reflective personality and humor. So the symbol and the meaning, we can see the two rods, it symbolizes life choices, the direction people take in life. The forest, it represents life's complexity and uncertainty. The traveler, it symbolizes every person making difficult decisions. And the line, the road less traveled, it often interpreted as a unique individual choices, though first tone is ironic because both roads were actually about the same. Okay, so for example, two roads diverge in a yellow way, and sorry I could not travel but. And this shows the speaker's conflict between choices and the human desire to see where other paths might have led. Okay, so the imagery, we can see the visual, tactile, and symbolic imagery. So for the visual, we can see the line is two roads diverge in a yellow way. It helps reader to picture the autumn forest and crossroad of life. While the tactile, the line is in leaves no step had trodden black. It evokes the untouched, fresh feeling for possibility. And by the symbolic imagery, the line road less travel, it reflects the speaker's inner sense of independence and choices. And through this imagery, Frost creates a reflective and contemplative mood, showing how even simple choices can shape a person's future and identity. Okay, so the next one is the short story. The story I'm going to explain is The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. Okay, so first of all, here are the books of The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. And I'm going to read the summary first. Okay, so the summary, it tells a story about a small town that holds an annual lottery for a sinister purpose, to select a person to be stoned to death by the community. The story appears festive at first, with townsfolk gathering on a summer day, but the mood darkens as they draw slips from a black box. The winner, Tessie Hutchinson, is ultimately killed by the other villager, highlighting themes of blind adherence to traditions and the potential for cruelty within the community. We can see the intrinsic elements from the short story. The first one is the plot structure itself. We can see the exposition, rising action, and the climax. By the exposition, it introduces the setting and situations. We can see the quotations here. The morning of June 27 was clear and sunny. The flowers were blooming profusely. The town gathers for an annual tradition called the lottery. People appear normal and friendly. The rising actions is when the villagers assemble, children gather stones, and Mr. Summers prepares the black box. The quotations is, the children had stones already. Bobby Martin had stuffed his pockets full of stones. The suspense grows as names are drawn. And the climax is when Tess Hutchinson draws the paper with the black dot. The quotation is, it wasn't fair, she screamed. This is the turning point where the winner is chosen. And here are the following action and the resolution. By the following action, the villager prepared to stone Tessie, and the quotation is, the children had stones already and someone gave little Davy Hutchinson a few pebbles. And the resolution is when the villagers stone Tessie to death and return to their normal lives. The quotation is, Then they were you, then they were upon her. The story ends abruptly, showing the brutality hidden under the charm. Okay, the intrinsic elements we can find in this short story is we can see the character and the characteristic of the character itself. First one is Tess Hutchinson. Characteristic is outspoken, cheerful at first, becomes panic when she is chosen. And the evidence we can see the line where she says, "It isn't fair, it isn't right," while she's screaming. And Mr. Summers, the characteristic is calm leader of the lottery, represent authority and traditions, and the evidence we can see the line where it says Mr. Summer had time and energy to devote to civic activities. So the next character is Mr. Graves. He is the postmaster assistant in conducting the lottery, symbolizing death and duty. By the evidence we can see where Mr. Graves follow him carrying a three-leg stool. The next one is Old Man Warner. He is the oldest man in town, strongly support the lottery. The evidence is where he say, "There's always been a lottery." He represent blind tradition and resistance to change. And the next one is the villager. The villager are just ordinary people who participate in violence without questions. We can see the evidence when the lines say, although the villagers had forgotten the ritual, they still remember to use stones. Okay, so I'm going to explain the extrinsic elements from this story. We can see the social, cultural, and historical context. By the social context, the story reflects how societies often follow tradition blindly, even when harmful. It criticizes conformity and collective violence, showing how normal people can commit brutal acts when pressured by society. By the cultural context, Jackson critiques the cultural value placed on tradition in small communities. The lottery itself represents outdated customs that continue simply because they always been done. They always done it. By the historical context, the story published in 1948, shortly after World War II and the Holocaust, and it reflects how people can participate in violence due to social obedience and cultural pressure. It also comments on post-war American society's tendency to hide brutality under normal routines. To retelling the stories, so in a small village, people gather every June 27 for an event called the lottery. At first, it seems like a harmless community gathering. Mr. Summer, who ran the event, bring out a black box filled with slips of paper. Each family draws one slip. When the Hutchinson family is chosen, they must draw again. Tess Hutchinson draws the slip marked with a black dot. Suddenly, the friendly villagers, including children, pick up stones and surround her. Although although Daisy screams that the lottery is unfair, the townspeople ignore her. They stone her to death as part of their long-standing traditions, then return to their normal activities like they always do. So that's it. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.